There was a moment, a single breath, when the world didn't change, but I did. And I realized afterward that this is how awakening actually happens, not in thunder, in the space between heartbeats. I was 35 years old. I was standing at the edge of a rooftop in the West Village at 4 in the morning. I'd been walking all night. I don't do that normally. I'm not the kind of person who walks through cities at 3 in the morning looking for meaning. But that night, something in me had become unbearable. There was a weight in my chest that I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten. It wasn't supposed to be there. It had become part of my skeleton. And around 3 o'clock, I just started walking. The streets were empty. In that way, New York streets are empty at night. They're actually empty, but a few people moving through them seemed like ghosts. I passed all-night diners and corner stores and buildings with windows, lit up where people were living their real lives behind the glass. I was outside of it all. I was outside of everything. And I couldn't remember the moment when the outside became a permanent place to stand. I found myself at this building I'd passed 1,000 times. It had a door that was technically locked, but didn't fully close. I went up the stairs. I don't remember making the choice to do this. It was more like my body knew where it needed to be before my mind caught up. And I ended up on the roof. The city was asleep, or it was pretending to sleep. The way a living thing pretends before it's about to wake. There was that quality to the air, that density. Like the world was holding its breath, and I was holding mine, and we were waiting for something to happen. I sat down on the edge, not dangerously, just on the ledge, my legs dangling over the street below. And I cried. Not the kind of crying where you're processing something. The kind where your soul is finally acknowledging that it's been dying for years and your body is just catching up to that knowledge. I don't know how long I sat there. The night had this elastic quality. Time wasn't moving forward. It was circling, folding back on itself, revealing layers. I was looking down at the street and I started to think about what it would mean to just step off. Not as a plan. Just as a fact, I was allowing myself to consider what would it feel like to let gravity take me? What would it feel like to stop holding on? And that's when something happened that I still can't quite articulate. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a vision. It wasn't any of the mystical things we're trained to expect. It was quieter than that. It was like the whole universe leaned in very close and whispered a single truth directly into the part of me that was already listening. The truth was this: I was not mine to destroy. That's the only way I can say it. Not life is worth living, not things will get better, not any of the platitudes that don't actually touch the darkness, just the simple, overwhelming knowledge that my life was not my own property to dispose of, that I was part of something larger than my own suffering, that my body, my consciousness, my existence was borrowed from something vast and strange and beautiful. And in that moment, everything inverted. The weight that had been pulling me down toward the streets suddenly felt like wings. The despair that had been collapsing inward suddenly opened outward into something that felt almost like gratitude. Not happy gratitude, not the gratitude of someone who's just been saved. The gratitude of someone who suddenly understood that they were never alone in their suffering, that the suffering itself was a doorway. The sky started to change. The darkness began to dissolve into this pale blue-gray. The city started to wake. I could hear a car horn in the distance. I could hear a siren somewhere. I could hear the world coming back to itself. And I was still sitting there, but I was different. The person who'd climbed the stairs wasn't the same person sitting on the roof anymore. There's a Japanese concept called mono no aware. It translates to the pathos of things, or the tender sorrow of impermanence. It's the idea that beauty is born from transience, that sadness and beauty are not opposites, that they're the same thing seen from different angles. Cherry blossoms are beautiful because they fall. Sunsets move us because they end. The human experience is unbearable precisely because it's finite and fragile and impossible to hold. Sitting on that roof as the sun came up, I felt that. I felt the terrible, exquisite beauty of being alive in a body that will die, of being conscious in a world that doesn't care about my consciousness, of being alone in a way that no other person can remedy. And instead of that crushing me, it freed me. Because if I was going to die anyway, if this was temporary, if nothing, I did matter in some cosmic sense, then what was I protecting? What was I defending? What was I so afraid of losing that I had to squeeze myself into such a small space? I realized that I'd spent my entire life trying not to take up too much space. I'd learned early that my existence was a problem. I'd learned that I needed to apologize for my body, my size, my presence. I'd learned to make myself smaller and smaller and smaller until I'd become a ghost inside my own life. And I thought that was safety. I thought that was survival. But I was dying. I was dying slowly from the inside because I'd agreed to become invisible. Sitting on that roof, watching the sun rise over the city, I made a decision, not with my mind, with something deeper. With the part of me that knew it was not mine to destroy, I decided to start taking up space. Not in a loud way, not in a defiant way, but the way a tree takes up space, the way the ocean takes up space, the way the universe takes up space, just by being exactly what I am. I came down from the roof. I walked through the waking city. The streets were starting to fill with people going to work, getting coffee, living their lives. And I was still small. I was still the same height. I still took up the same amount of physical space. But something had shifted in how I occupied that space. I was no longer apologizing for it. I was no longer trying to disappear. I was just here, taking up exactly as much room as I was meant to take up. I went home. My wife was asleep. I got into bed without waking her. And I slept the deepest sleep I'd slept in years. The sleep of someone who'd finally stopped running from themselves. When I woke up, the world looked the same, but I was looking at it from a different place inside myself. The sun coming through the window was the same sun that had come through that window 1,000 times. But I was seeing it like I'd never seen it before. Like it was a message. Like everything was a message. If I was quiet enough to listen. There's a poet named Rilke. He writes a lot about listening. He says, perhaps everything that frightens us is in its deepest essence something helpless that wants our love. He's talking about how we're afraid of the very things we need to be kind to. We're terrified of our own vulnerability, our own mortality, our own smallness. And so we harden, we protect, we become defended. But what if instead of hardening, we opened? What if instead of defending against our own mortality, we actually let it teach us what it's trying to teach us? That's what happened to me on that roof. My mortality, my fragility, my fundamental aloneness, all the things I'd been defending against, they finally caught up to me. And when they did, instead of it being a death, it was an awakening. It was my life saying to me, wake up. Stop hiding. This is what you get. This right here. This breath, this moment, this body, this presence. Stop wasting it on fear. After that night, I moved through the world differently. I made different choices. I said yes to auditions I would have avoided because I thought I wasn't meant for them. I said no to work that didn't feel true. I started having real conversations with people instead of performing interactions. I started looking at my own reflection and seeing a person instead of a problem. Game of Thrones came along a few years later, but I don't think I would have been able to do that work if I hadn't been to the roof, because Tyrion requires a kind of honesty that only comes from someone who's already looked into the abyss and decided to keep living anyway. Tyrion requires someone who's not trying to convince anyone of anything, someone who's just standing in the truth of who they are, someone who's already made peace with their own mortality and fragility. I wasn't trying to be that person. I just became that person because I'd finally stopped trying to be anything else. I'm 56 now. That night on the roof was 21 years ago. I don't think about it constantly, but I feel it constantly. It's not something I remember. It's something I'm always living inside of. It's become the foundation of how I move through the world. It's the thing I return to whenever I start to drift back into smallness, whenever I start to apologize for existing, whenever I start to believe that I don't deserve to take up space. I remind myself I was not mine to destroy. I am part of something larger. My suffering is not meaningless. My fragility is not a flaw. My mortality is what makes me alive. My presence exactly as it is what the world needs. And something shifts. Every single time something shifts, the weight lifts a little bit. The world becomes a little bit more beautiful. I become a little bit more awake. So if you're out there right now and you're carrying something you don't think you can carry anymore, if you're thinking about stepping off your own roof, not literally, but metaphorically, if you're thinking about giving up, about giving in, about letting the weight finally win, I want to tell you something. You are not yours to destroy. You are part of something. You might not know what that something is. You might not be able to name it or see it or prove it. But it's there. It's moving through you. It's breathing you. It's using your eyes to see itself. It's using your hands to touch itself. It's using your consciousness to know itself. And that's something that vast, unknowable, beautiful, something it didn't bring you here to watch you disappear. It brought you here to wake up, to take up space, to stop apologizing, to look at the world with the tender eyes of someone who knows that it's fragile and temporary and heartbreakingly beautiful because of it. This is not a metaphor. You are meant to be here, not because you've earned it, not because you deserve it, but because the universe doesn't make mistakes. The universe made you exactly as you are, and the universe doesn't make things by accident, so sit with that. Let that be true for a moment. You are here on purpose. Your presence matters. Your consciousness is not a mistake. Your smallness is not a flaw. Your fragility is exactly what makes you real. Exactly what makes you alive. And if you can believe that even for one breath, even for one moment, even sitting on a roof at 4 in the morning, when the whole world feels like it's ending, if you can believe that for one moment, everything changes. The world doesn't change, but you do. And that's where the revolution begins. That's where the awakening starts. In the quiet of a single moment when you finally decide to stay here, in your body, in your life, in this breath, in this exact moment, broken as it is, fragile as it is, beautiful as it is, stay. The universe is waiting for you to wake up so it can love you with the full force of its infinite heart.